I'm Heather, and I am in my final semester, so I'm super excited. But and the quests or that I picked were the branching scenarios. And I think one of the biggest reasons I chose branching scenarios is because what I do every day at work is design trainings for primary care practices, and it's a lot of workforce development trainings. So I like the idea of branching scenarios because it can kind of activate some of those critical thinking skills that that are needed for somebody, for example, that's sitting at the front desk and a patient comes in with a whole list of things and they have to try and figure out, do they go to the nurse, to the provider, do they just schedule an appointment, something like that. Or we also work with what are called care managers, and they're usually nurses who work with really critical patients who have a lot of chronic conditions, and spend a little bit more time with them, kind of looking at the whole person. So again, the idea of branching scenarios I liked because we could say, okay, this person comes in, it's almost like a case study, but this person comes in with, you know, these symptoms, what path should you follow? And kind of not necessarily have wrong answers, but, you know, what might be the best thing for the patient? And also, are they listening to the patient's stories? And, you know, is it beyond, like, if a patient's not taking their medication, is it because they can't afford it, because they just don't want to, or they don't have a ride to the pharmacy, you know, some of those sorts of things, and trying to just keep all of that in mind. So that's why I really liked the branching scenarios. And the one I thought, at least for adults, which would work best, even though it was a little cheesy, were those that moment when. So it was those videos that like the girl had to figure out, she was at a party and this guy walked up to her who she was supposed to know and had to figure out who he was before the end of the video. And so I thought something like that could be interesting because it's watching a video that healthcare people tend to like, but it was interactive and engaging and made them think while watching the video.
So I'm Daryl. I'm in my second semester of the program. And in the branching scenarios, I kind of followed a lot of the more engaging ones. And I like the idea of branching scenarios because it kind of like harkened back to when I was a kid and reading the Choose Your Own Adventure books. My sister and I loved those when we were sitting in the back of the truck on long trips. You know, trying to figure out how many different ways you could tell that story, or, you know, where you would end up. So those really appealed to me a lot more than a digital ethnography, just because of level of going out and actually asking other people questions and having to talk to other people. So the ones that I liked, that moment when, I thought that was kind of fun and humorous. The ones that really touched me, though, was the one that harkened back to 1944 and the students at the school in 1944 having to make a choice whether or not they were going to join the war, Second World War or not. And having the students then run around the school and around town, taking a look at things and watching videos that didn't overlay. I thought that would have been a little more interesting, but watching videos of things that were shot in the same position where they're standing, looking at the same building, and just really kind of bringing their present into context with something in the past really just kind of touched me. I found that to be really engaging and something that I kind of always thought would be sort of fun to do, to build kind of locally as a tourist. type thing. You could walk around, downtown Denver, and the massive changes that have happened since, like, when I was a kid here in the 70s, to be able to take a look at then and now right there on your iPad or on your phone, or VR goggles or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I think, just kind of fascinates me. I like history and my place in time and stuff like that. So,
I'm Shauna Sturchnoff, and I'm in, what is this? I guess this is my third semester. I don't know if you count a summer class or not, but
oh yeah.
I did.
yeah, I did the same thing. I was thinking about, the one you were just talking about, and how it relates to history and things like, like that. And I thought about, I live halfway between Lyons and Estes, so I was having a lot of fun. There's an old stagecoach um, road or path that goes, from one to the other, like Golden. There's so
Wow.
much history up in Golden.
Hmm.
Oh wow, that would be a really cool tool to go up in those areas and like just pull the history out and create some sort of a learning tool that somebody could pull up on their phone and be like, oh wow, this happened right here, kind of thing. Um, yeah, I thought that was pretty powerful. I really enjoyed that. But um, for me, I was drawn to the branching scenarios just because I really feel like, my two boys were so polar different, and one of them did real well in traditional, in the traditional school setting, and the other one it was a nightmare. And the more often he got to actually do himself and engage in projects and things like that, the much easier it was for him. And he's a very intelligent person, but it just I just feel like, when you give the learner some choice, when you give them, some way to interact with whatever it is that they're learning, it just seems to resonate so much more, and there's so much more engagement, and they're drawn back to it rather than, I hate school, I don't want to go. That for me, I thought I really want to learn more about how to do these branching scenarios and things, whether the cool cell phone thing that's, you can put the historical or geographical um, learning into play, or like I teach music theory and also piano, but for the music theory aspect of it, I'm trying to envision, and I actually started thinking about this years ago, and probably 5 or 6 years ago, and at that point just didn't even have any idea where to start. And I don't really, some ways I don't feel like I still do from the programming side of it, but I think it would be really cool to create a music theory game that was similar to like RuneScape or World of Warcraft, where there's a world that these kids can wander through and visit the different composers and learn about that era and what their life was like, and incorporate the music and composing and theory into this giant game. So that still feels like really pie in the sky to me, but I can see, on something like that, it's like, okay, figure out which way do you want to go first, right? You want to go visit Beethoven or Bach or Grieg, or, so I just feel like there's so much power um, behind the branching scenarios.
So, out of all of those platforms, which ones did you like?
It's hard for me to say I really like this one or I really like that one, because
Mhm.
I'm kind of one of those people who's like, I want to get in here and I want to do it, right?
Right.
I want to see it, I want to play with it before I really throw a dart and say, I really like this one, or I really like that one. So I liked I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. Like and I also think, honestly, I think that, there's different tools for different things, right? If you were creating
Mhm.
wandering around historical kind of a thing where you're creating a learning environment and trying to bring history back, or something like that, then and I don't see, is this where I responded? I'm trying to think of the name of the Metaverse. I think it was Metaverse. Was that the one that had the father? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one with the father
The
and
father.
playing the games with the sons.
Family quests and yep. So
Yep.
for that and metaverse, I love that. I thought that would be so cool, to be able to do if you were in the right environment and you had kids or you wanted to teach something like that. And I really love the idea of augmented reality. I haven't really been able to touch on that too much. But if I'm thinking more from this side of the equation as a teacher and being able to figure out, how to utilize tools, I think something more, and I want to believe the little bit I've used Twine, I'm not sold that it's the best thing out there, but I don't have the knowledge to be like, oh, there's all these different platforms and this is the one that works. But Twine does give you, you have the little, have you guys looked at Twine or used?
I've created a few things in Twine.
Yeah. So I like the fact that you can, okay, here's question A, and then we can branch like this, and then you end up here, and then you branch from there. And, so it feels like it's kind of more of a branching, interactive learning thing for something where students are making choices, if they're sitting somewhere and having to work and they're not, out and about in the real world, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, right. That's like something like Twine has attracted me to it, because most of what I design for are people that are sitting at a computer. Like, they're not going to be able to get up and go outside and follow through with something, or, because they're in their healthcare practice. And so they've got a half hour between patients. They can spend a half hour and do this scenario, or 15 minutes. So, I can't use, or right now with what I'm doing, I can't use things like metaverse, or haven't figured out, I shouldn't say can't, haven't figured out ways to use those type of tools. But Twine has been the one that I've used, I think probably because it was the first one I was exposed to. And I do like the idea of the branching. I wish there was a little bit more there's a lot of freedom with the designing, but you have to know some basic coding to be able to put that in. So like it took me 45 minutes to figure out how to do bullets. And I haven't even touched like changing the font color or putting in an image or a video. And I know it can be done. I just like, okay, we're gonna be happy with bullets for this one for now. So I think that's one of the drawbacks of Twine is the coding. And I know I need to learn a little bit more, but I don't want to be a coder either. So
totally relate there, because I was trying to use it for something at work, to try to build out a little interactive quiz kind of a thing for new employees. And with regard to safety, I work in a warehouse at CU in the front office, and I was like, I just don't want to look at this black screen the whole time. I want to be like, make it a little bit more creative and engaging, and just from a visual aspect. And I thought the same thing. I was playing with it, and I kind of was getting the whole how to branch things and move things, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I was like, but how do I do all the rest of it, right? I felt the logic and the branching is there, but it can't just be a black screen with white text on here, because this is totally boring.
yeah.
I really thought it was interesting, when Kathy Moore has the is it ever okay to be a control freak thing that's out there. And I feel like I know, like when I grew up and when I was going to school, I mean, that was just expected. The teacher was, you followed, you did. There was no, in my world, there was not a whole lot of interaction. There was certainly not very much choice or anything like that. It was just what they say went. That was the way it was going to happen. And
Very passive learning.
Very passive learning. That's not how I learn best. I mean, that's what you had, so you battled your way through. But I was a very mediocre student, because that just doesn't, I just don't connect in that environment at all. As an adult, I love learning, and I love school, and I love, digging in and things, but it's a whole different environment than when, you're young and sitting in a classroom and basically what teacher says goes. So yeah, so for me, that was kind of like, I think that's what drew me to branching scenarios. There's got to be tools out there that, make it a little bit easier to do that kind of thing. I don't know what they are yet.
I want to dive into a little bit more I don't know if it's Echo or Eco that the was used to create the that moment when videos.
Yeah.
And watching that video with the MIT professor about Scratch, and it was designed for kids, but the way he explained it, I'm like, I need to jump into that and see if I can use that for what I'm doing, because you don't have to know coding, you just can use blocks. So I really like that and want to dive into that and see if that's something that might work.
Looking forward to summer for that reason too. Definitely like, oh, this looks interesting, but no time right now.
No.
Yeah. Had either of you checked out the character bots, like Texture or anything?
I did. I looked at them. Or is this the one I think I tried to look at a little bit? And as I was looking at it, one of them, I was like, I don't even understand how this works.
Yeah, I was kind of feeling the same way. But then, what was I doing just the other day? I was doing something and was interacting online with customer service. And I think that my customer service rep was a character bot.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, the screen comes up and there's this cartoon character and asks me a question and gives me, 2 responses, and I clicked on the one that fit what I was doing, and then it came back with another response, and it had a blank field, and I was able to type in my problem, and it immediately responded with something according to that, and which was weird since it was a free-form text field. But yeah, so I think I may have interacted with the character bot.
Wow.
But I wasn't able to, from the links on our web class page, I couldn't follow too many of those.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever, especially timely, right? It's like,
yeah,
how funny.
right. But every one of these things I'm looking at from a designer perspective. Like, how much time am I going to have to spend, one, learning the tool, and then 2, figuring out how it's going to apply to whatever type of training I'm working on. And then how much time does it take to build it so that you can then put that out to your learners. It's just like, unless I was contracted, to do something, but working for a corporation or a school, it kind of boggles my mind that anybody would ever be able to use those because of the time it would take to build them.
Yeah, but as you're saying that, I was just thinking it would actually be kind of cool to have one of the classes just be totally tech. It's like 1 week, here's what we're doing, here's an overview, here's how you use the thing, create a little project. I mean, you get, 16 weeks worth of different, at least a little bit of an idea of what they do and how to do how to actually work in it.
Right. Yes.
I think that's kind of what Scratch was designed for, or kind of with that same idea or similar in mind.
Makes it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
If you could just bounce through, a lot of these different things. Okay, well, today we're going to work in Eco or whatever, or this week we're going to work in Eco, or this segment we're going to use Eris, or now we're going to do Twine. Let's do some stuff in Metaverse. Let's work in Articulate. You're building a lot of skills. And I think if you had to take the design class first, it's like, okay, now you have your design basics. So now you're actually using those in these different, programs. And then I think that would be really valuable. But anyway.
No, I think it's hard though. I think you make a good point, but it's hard because there's so many out there. So I think it's like, do you pick like the key 3 or 4 and then you get a job that's something totally different, or you find something? Because that's where I've kind of been at, is like, do I want to learn more about Captivate or Articulate, or just use the learning management system that we have, which is called Litmus, and use
Mhm.
their authoring tool, which is really basic, but I'm learning that
Mhm.
instead partly because that's what the company paid for. They're not willing to pay, especially for Captivate. The company I work for is a nonprofit. So I'm sure they've got similar, or like our budgetary concerns are similar for what schools are. So what's a school willing to pay for to have all of this? Or do we pay for it on our own? And
Exactly.
I am not willing to pay for Articulate on my own
Right.
to learn about it. So it's like,
Yeah.
but I know you need to have the experience. It's like a chicken egg sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's
And
tough.
that's very much along the lines of the question that I posed was, I found um, uh, you can get a certificate in one of them. I think it was Captivate. Um, but for me to be able to do that, I would have to spend, I think it was $3,500 for the certificate classes,
Mm.
and I would have to travel to the city where they are administering the classes
Oh, wow.
and spend money on room and board for the entire time that you're out there. And I think it was like a 6 weeks sort of thing. Maybe it was less, but it's just like I don't have the money for that. But how do you ask a school to do the same thing? Just like you were saying, Heather, that was one of the questions I had is, well, which one do you pick? Presuming that once, maybe with other, like similar to other applications, once you learn one, all the others are very similar. It's just that the user experience is just a little bit different. The graphics are different, that sort of thing. But the core of it is the same. I thought it was interesting that ClassBot responded to the example that I gave about what was it? The video was one of those branching scenarios where the story that I chose was the guy that was having some grief, was dealing with grief. And you go through and you get to a spot in the story and you make a decision how you would react to him. And then that continues the video all the way to the end. And at the very end, it comes back and lets you know, like, your choices ended up with this possibility. Here are ways that you could have dealt with that better. And so it's like, oh, that's pretty brilliant. But actually, ClassBot says the tool they used for this one was Elucidate.
You can build branching scenarios in PowerPoint if you really want to be,
Right.
they're not, I mean, you can make them as animated as you want, but I just know it because I built Jeopardy in PowerPoint. And so it's not exactly branching, but enough where you can, if you click on here, then you go to this slide. If you click on here, you go to this slide. So you can do that in something like a PowerPoint. It's just not as robust, or it's definitely doesn't have the production value that an Articulate or Captivate does.
But I have seen that branching scenario used in PowerPoint. One of the tools that we used at the state when I was a trainer was a game like Jeopardy, and we would play it just like they do the TV game as a learning tool. So.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of options out there. I just have that pie in the sky vision, right? That's just like, I want to make this amazing. How do I do it?
Yeah.
But I think that's where you start. You start with the big picture and figure out what you can do, and then maybe not start with something quite so exciting, but you know what your final vision is, and so you can work toward it and figure out what tool is good to start with, and then eventually, either if something hasn't come along that's doesn't require coding or doesn't require a lot of money, something will, because I think everybody that thinks that way is kind of in the same boat.
How do you imagine these kinds of examples might be used with a group of participants constructing a story together?
Definitely get the tool that allows other people to help you out, so you've got a team rather than trying to take on pie in the sky on your own.
Yeah.
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 And I think like a Twine, how can people conduct or create a story together? And so I think by having some of those creation tools, by, you know, all logging into Twine or sharing a Twine link and design, or sharing like in Scratch or Roblox, or that's what you said, like in the classroom where it's a project for a class. So it's, you create this in Eco all together, which I think is what you had said, Shauna. So I think that's another example of where people can co-create a story as a group.
Yeah.
Because it's open source and you can share it, and it's all internet based. I mean, you can download something, but that could probably be something that's used together. Another one that I just found out about, and it was through my nephew. Have you guys heard of Roblox?
No.
It's like, it's a game platform. It was designed for like 10 and up kids, but there's games on there that you can play and play with other people, but you can also design your own games. I just found out, and add those to it. And it's kind of it's similar. When I was watching about Scratch, I was thinking about Roblox and how they're kind of similar. I don't know how the game creation is on Roblox, but I would think that that could be something else where you can work together and have a group of people create either games or branching scenarios, or even probably a ethnography with something like that, and it can be done as a group. So I think that that's a nice thing. But I was kind of drawn to the creation part, especially like for this class, and how it tied into storytelling, and how that there's something else, and there's, for the most part, it's free. There's things you can pay for, but there are free parts to it.
But how do you choose tools, and how do you figure out what's going to work best when you don't really know what's out there? And I think that's my biggest struggle right now, right?
And I've had the opposite, where there's so much out there and I want to learn all about it, and so I want to incorporate that, and then I get overwhelmed that way.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
okay, this course has these programs in it, and then this one has this, and then it's like, what am I thinking? And then I've got myself in a pickle because I can't finish anything because there's too much going on.
Just like you said, Shauna, like in my other class, in one of our discussion forums, I posted, just kind of pose the question out to people, like, if you don't have, and Heather, we were sort of talking about it earlier, if you don't have any hands-on experience with some of these software programs, like authoring tools, Articulate and what have you, where do you get that experience? Because nice to be able to chat virtually face to face.
Right.
Yes.
And do this more. So, all right.
Have a good rest of your weekend.